welcome to the Acid Trash Jamboree, a channel dedicated to weird and wonderful music and films from all over the world. Okay, so for this first episode, I thought I'd talk about a band that's very close to my heart. One of my favourites, if not my favourite band of all time, the Incredible String Band, who way back in the 1960s, along with acts such as Donovan, Roy Harper and Tyrannosaurus Rex, pioneered the British wing of the psychedelic or acid folk genre and proved extremely influential in the process. Now, over the course of 2 videos, I do intend on talking through all of the albums that I have by them, including a couple of notable solo works that were released during the band's lifespan. So there's quite a lot to get through, but first here's a bit of background information about their early days. Okay, so they formed in 1965 in Edinburgh, Scotland. Initially they were a trio comprising of Robin Williamson, Clive Palmer and Mike Heron. Now Williamson and Palmer had actually already been playing folk music together for a couple of years by that point. Then Heron joined the ranks, apparently just in the role of rhythm guitarist at first, though obviously he soon established himself as a great writer and a singer. Then in the first half of 1966 they were spotted by the young Joe Boyd and signed up to Elektra Records. Now, Boyd was actually the head of the label's offices in London at that stage, and he also went on to manage them for several years, plus he produced all of the material that the band made for the label. They quickly set about recording this, their self-titled debut, which was actually completed in one afternoon, with everyone performing live into a single microphone. As you can see on this cover, they're holding up some rather curious-looking acoustic instruments. Though as far as I can tell, none of them feature on the album, so that's a bit misleading, though in fairness, it wouldn't be long before they actually started to broaden their sound palette by incorporating various instruments from other cultures. Nonetheless, this was a very promising start, as was becoming the norm by this point in the folk world. It comprises mostly of original stuff, with just a small amount of traditional tunes on offer. Mike Heron opens the record really well, with his song Maybe Someday, which sounds, to my ears at least, quite influenced by Eastern European music maybe. Then it's followed by the real classic here, Robin's October song, which found a fan in none other than Bob Dylan, who once called it quite good. Though also of note is Womankind, which is another Robin song. This one points the way forward to the later esoteric material, the melody occasionally floating up there into the Eastern ether. Plus you've got Clive Palmer's wonderful downbeat anthem, Empty Pocket Blues, which I actually had the great pleasure of seeing him play live when I saw an incarnation of the ISB back in 2004. Overall, the performances here are spirited and lively, meaning everything zips by in no time at all, and crucially, it never gets boring. Now, strangely, the band actually split up right after the album was finished, with both Palmer and Williamson going off travelling overseas for a while, though Robin at least did return, and armed with assorted instruments that he picked up along the way, like the djembe, the oud and the sitar. He reunited with Mike in 1967, which is where things got very interesting. Okay, so this is the 5,000 Spirits, or the Layers of the Onion, with a classic, rather beautiful psychedelic cover design by the art collective known as The Fool. They're most famous for their work with the Beatles and Cream, though incidentally they did produce their own album of string band-esque music in 1968. I own it, I've played it several times, and I have to say, it's not the greatest. Anyways, the 5,000 Spirits. Now this was the first one I bought way back in my late teens, and actually I remember when I took it up to the counter to pay for it, the shop owner seemed genuinely surprised, possibly even a little bit concerned that I was buying it. I do admit it was kind of a heady old sonic brew for me to take in, for sure, especially at that age, but I soon learnt to love it, and it probably remains my favourite of their albums. Both members were at the top of their game writing-wise. Mike's catchy, sometimes whimsical songs like Little Cloud and Painting Box contrast nicely with Robin's weird and wild stuff, the apex of which is probably the Mad Hatter's song, which is quite the trip. I mean, who else was writing songs like that at the time? Pretty much nobody. That said, First Girl I Loved, featuring the legend Danny Thompson on bass, is easily one of his most directly beautiful songs. So yeah, wonderful, diverse album overall, stuffed to bursting point with colour and creativity. This one also marked the first appearance on record by Christina McKechnie, aka Licorice or Licky, who was Robin's girlfriend at the time. She would later become a full-time member of the group, though here she's a guest providing backing vocals on 3 songs. Now, if the 5,000 Spirits is their happy, sunshiny summer album, then the 1968 follow-up, The Hangman's Beautiful Daughter, is definitely their winter album, the darker, shadowlier, kind of mystical, pagan atmosphere hanging over much of it. Musically, it's quite a bit looser too, sounding a bit more improvised almost, and quite dissonant in places, especially stuff like 3 as a Green Crown and Waltz of the New Moon. Robin contributed the lion's share of the material here, which is a trend we'll see repeating over the next few albums, though the centrepiece of Hangman's is Mike's classic 13-minute epic, a very cellular song, which is possibly the most celebrated song overall. My personal fave, though, is the closer Nightfall, which is just a gorgeous little jewel. Believe it or not, the album was quite a hit in the UK at the time of its release. It actually got to number 5 in the charts, and for a lot of people it remains their creative high watermark, with some like David Tibet of Current 93 once claiming that it was the only good thing that they ever did. I beg to differ, of course, but whatever. Also from 68 is Tam and the Big Huge, a sprawling double LP, which was also released as 2 separate albums, much like Donovan's A Gift from a Flower to a Garden had been the year before. Of the 2, I prefer Tam. Feels a touch more cohesive than the Big Huge for me, and it features overall better stuff from Mike. I think his material on the second disc is rather nondescript, almost boring at times. Robin's stuff, though, is pretty much all gold. Job's Tears, The Half Remarkable Question, Ducks on a Pond, Mayer, The Iron Stone, and especially The Circle is Unbroken, which is very haunting indeed. But yeah, really, these songs are all acid folk masterpieces for me. Now, I should also point out that, like Licky before her, Rose Simpson, who was then Mike's girlfriend, began contributing to the string band on this album, though it wasn't until the follow-up that either of the girls would be considered as full-time members. Okay, so come 1969, the band were on the road for much of the time, which included an apparently lacklustre, some would say dreadful, performance at the legendary Woodstock Festival, so the release schedule did slow down quite a lot. Changing Horses was released towards the end of the year, and truth be told, it's probably the weakest of the 60s LPs. Much of the playing time is taken up by these 2 epic compositions, Mike's White Bird and Robin's Creation. These have their moments, especially the latter, but overall could have done with some pruning. The 4 shorter pieces are pretty good, if a little bit on the twee side at times. Personally speaking, overall, it's hard to get too worked up either way about this album, though I do still play it occasionally. Now, 1970's I Looked Up is, to my ears at least, much fresher and more inspired. Like its predecessor, it also features 6 tracks, among them a pair of absolute monsters from Robin, including the frankly terrifying Pictures in a Mirror, which is easily their darkest ever song. Also sounds like this one was quite a strong influence on the band Comus, especially their twisted 1971 masterpiece First Utterance, which is a must listen if you're into psychedelic folk music. Mike seemed to be getting his mojo back here too, especially with This Moment and Fair As You, which are 2 very sweet songs. The Letter is also a notable one. This one features Dave Mattox of Fairport Convention on drums. This was the first time that the ISB had flirted with a folk rock sound and featured any kind of regular kit drumming on any of their tracks, though it wouldn't be the last time. Another little anecdote for you, but I actually remember buying this one on the same day that the Strokes' second album, Room on Fire, came out. I wonder which one ended up getting played more. Now, we end this video with the last album that the band made for Elektra, probably the most ambitious one of their whole career, You, another double LP, which came out in the summer of 1970. Now, by this point, the band were working alongside an experimental British theatre troupe known as Stone Monkey, headed up by a fella named Malcolm LeMaistre, who they'd originally met whilst in America sometime in 1968. The resulting You project was a multimedia affair, described by Robin as a surreal parable in song and dance, which was actually only performed a handful of times, I do believe, in both London and New York. Accounts differ as to how successful the show actually was, with critics at least calling it a shambolic and amateurish disaster, though apparently that was the whole point, and the audiences loved it anyway. Now, I've never seen any footage of any of the shows, only photos, but apparently at least one date was filmed and may yet see the light of day, which would be a kind of interesting watch, to say the least. Anyways, the You show wiped out the band's finances, unfortunately, meaning when it came to record the actual music, they had to do it all in a mere 48 hours. Possibly as a result, some of the material ended up a little bit Spartan and unadorned. That said, this is mostly fantastic stuff, with a good few masterpieces from Robin, as you'd expect, like the kind of Robbie Basho-esque song Time, and a song called Queen of Love, which is a stunning and rather fruity composition featuring orchestration by Tom Constantine, who'd also done stuff with the Grateful Dead, apparently. Also of note is Robin's Astral Plane theme, which is a rather kooky acoustic guitar improvisation, which in my mind at least, it's kind of like an unofficial sequel to John Fahey's guitar excursions into the unknown. Plus you've got things like Cutting the Strings, which is just utterly nuts. It actually sounds like something from the Hangman's period, actually. Mike also shines with the curious little piano song, Light in Time of Darkness, and the epic closing number Rainbow, whilst Licky actually turns in a beautiful, haunting solo piece called I Know You. There's one very obvious dud here, the novelty honky tonk parody Bad Sadie Lee, which was written and sung by Janet Shankman, who had been working with the band since Changing Horses. She took the cover photo and also painted the covers for I Looked Up and You. She also later became Robin's wife and manager. Anyway, that's just 4 minutes out of a 2-hour epic, and honestly, on the whole, this is wonderful stuff. Very self-indulgent, of course, but never mind. I think it goes without saying, but if you hate self-indulgence, then perhaps steer clear of the string band in general. You is actually the last full ISB work to make it onto CD. All previous reissue campaigns had neglected it, unfortunately, so it actually took until 2002 for that to happen, but I, for one anyway, am glad it did. Okay, so that's the end of the Elektra period. In the next video, we'll be taking a look at the band's years spent on Island Records. Thanks for checking out the video, hope you like it, and see you in the next one.